and it's a lock-up for Kimi Andrea.
Luckily, Antonelli is still that young and brass cunt, kind of knocking some poor sap's teeth out at the bar.
You know, there's a time where you just mind your own business, and I think that's one of those times.
If it wasn't for the two McLarens playing tag in the beginning, I'd be reviewing curling videos this week.
Austria's firmly within.
Lando Norris.
Piastri. Piastri's closer this lap.
Piastri.
Honestly, how fucking broken am I? Crucify me for not addressing how big of a cunt the guy is now.
So I think someone might need to tell Ferrari at some point.
They're all fucking fired. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, mate. Stroll, of course, banging his head against the fucking wall.
And why pit?
Worthy of an F1 highlights episode. This one should be pretty short. Now, although there was a slight jolt of adrenaline, courtesy of the kid, and a fun little escapade between the boys in orange for a short while, the overall rating I'll give to the GP is a C-. If you haven't seen it, don't bother. But I really can't help but notice on my side is that this is not the first time I've come out of the Grand Prix feeling this emptiness inside me. Well, at least more empty than usual. What a fucking Grand Prix, said no one ever about Canada. Honestly, this is probably one of the most fucking boring races I witnessed this season. And we've already had the Monaco GP this year. But honestly, this Grand Prix really didn't reveal much at all. And looking back at it, most of us will just glance over it and write it off as yet another filler episode in the grand scheme of the 2025 championship. The one thing, ironically, that it might have revealed is the reason why quite a few of the more recent Grand Prix have left us all feeling so flaccid. Something, I think, might be a systematic issue. Something we need to address, or at the very least, consider and admit to ourselves. Honestly, if it wasn't for the two McLarens playing tag in the beginning, I'd be reviewing curling videos this week. During every race nowadays, I try to take notes of all the memorable things that happened, so that I can go back and reference them and actually have something to fucking talk about for the 2 to 3 videos I try to squeeze out until we hit another clusterfuck of a weekend. It's honestly not an easy job. One weekend Verstappen is on fire, labelled as this good guy, the underdog, doing his darndest to still be in the championship fight. I begin writing a video saying why he may very well get the W this year and be the champion, despite the racing McLarens. Next thing I know, the fucker's gone mental and slaps the sappy Brit across the face and gets a 10-grid penalty and has a race ban looming over his rectangular mug. What the fuck am I supposed to do here? If I put out the video, y'all will fucking crucify me for not addressing how big of a cunt the guy is now. What am I to do? Whatever. Let's take this one step at a time. Let me just play you some of my fucking reactions, immediate reactions that I had during Grand Prix that I actually recorded. This way I think we'll be better able to understand why the Austrian GP just felt like a little bit of excitement in the beginning, and then the rest just was an open, empty fucking space, mate. Just vacuum. Because I couldn't be asked actually taking notes this time. I decided to just fucking do an open mic. Yeah. Some of it's pre-recorded, some of it's not. Just watch it, mate. Cheers.
And the Grand Prix is underway. A good launch off the line for Lando Norris. Sees him chop across Charles Leclerc.
Right off the bat, the top 3 get a really good start off the line, and in turn 1, it almost gets exciting there for a second. Until it doesn't.
Great amount of momentum, but was blocked. Oscar Piastri roars around the outside and takes second position. McLaren 1-2.
And there you go. You pretty much fucking called the whole Grand Prix right there. On lap 1. Turn 1. Fucking hell. So in short, for those that didn't catch that, Lando slams the door on Charlie, and since he's no longer a young buck trying to prove himself and his best days are essentially behind him, he slows way down, essentially taking him out of contention for anything higher than P3 for the remainder of the race. Yeah, that's pretty much the story for Ferrari. That's it. Oh, stop texting me.
But Lando Norris gets the run that he needs, and it's a lock-up for Kimi Andrea.
Luckily, Antonelli is still that young and brass cunt, and it literally caused the only moment of the Grand Prix, slamming into the side of the Dutchman. Now, having scrupulously analysed the incident, and taking all potential perspectives into consideration, and consulting VAR, I've deducted that, yeah, Kimi f***ed up. Thank you very much for watching. In all honesty, I think he was just a little bit over-ambitious. what a surprise, an Italian teenager being overly confident in his abilities. Essentially, he went for a ridiculous move down the inside and forgot that this is not 2020 F1, and Mercedes more resembles a rusty weather vane atop a collapsing church than a silver arrow, and had no chance of slowing down on time. But kudos to the kid. As I said, that was actually one of the 2 moments of the whole Grand Prix actually worthy of an F1 highlights episode. This one should be pretty short. After that comes the most exciting part of the Grand Prix, during which all cameras were glued on one team alone. Even the few replays that were sliced in by the producers were, I would say, more out of habit rather than actual content.
2 great race winners is that you can compete week in, week out.
For like 10 to 15 laps, it was amazing. Honestly, one of the best things I've had to witness in a good long time. For the first time from lap 1, there was genuine contention for the lead of the race. A lead of the race that was actually substantial for the Grand Prix, and even in the context of the whole fucking season. There they were, the 2 blokes atop the championship, battling each other lap after lap to see who can win the Grand Prix and inherently take the lead of the season. Well, almost. For some that have not been around F1 for too long and are not used to the typically very exciting nature of the sport, this would seem quite typical and, well, normal. The 2 leaders should be battling it out like this every Grand Prix, shouldn't they? I mean, at the end of the day, this is what they're all there for. Well, as a matter of fact, this was quite extraordinary. Typically, for many different reasons, there was not the case at all. The first one is that, well, it doesn't usually all go this rosy in their battles now, does it?
To maintain the position for the remainder of the Grand Prix.
Just a waft to the inside, looking for more!
For a second, there it actually was pretty f***ing touch and go. Poor Piastri even got spanked by the engineers for being a tad too naughty.
Oscar, feedback from the pit wall. The manoeuvre in turn 4 with the front lockup was too marginal. We can't do that again.
But if we look back even further, it's just usually not the case that the cars would even get within proximity of each other. Like, honestly, when you really think about it, for the past God knows how many years, we've rarely witnessed that the number 1 and number 2 are within touching distance of each other. Typically, it is that they're not on the same team. In that case, it's way more often than not that because the 2 cars are different, that one car performs better on one track and then the other has tremendous pace somewhere else, and then Ferrari ends up sucking ass on 90% of the F1 calendar. But then when there is a clear leading team, like now, and like many years before, the 2 cars are just not the same. At all. Honestly, it would be so fucking surprising to see Perez and Verstappen battling on track. Or Hamilton and Bottas going at it. That just wouldn't fucking happen now, would it? Even if the 2 cars would end up side by side, it would be more likely one of them was being lapped by the other, and the team engineer was screaming down the walkie-talkie, ordering the immediate surrender of the poor sap. While now, it is a very rare occurrence where not only is there a clear one-team dominance on the majority of the tracks, but also there is no number 1. I mean, there is, but it's not so blatantly shoved in your face by the team. No actual orders are thrown around, so both of them are quite free to race. Thank you, McLaren. Thank you. Without your contribution, this would be a very, very f***ing shit season, let me tell you. But, to be fair, you are also doing it because you kind of have to. With Lando on your team, you really can't put all your eggs in one basket, can you? The poor sap is less predictable than a blue flag color Pinto.
It's back in the way.
I'm still very fucking thankful to them. I mean, this is the focus of the whole championship at the moment. But this alone, unfortunately, is not enough to hold up the season. Because as we clearly saw, once the 2 boys are separated, the racing is essentially done, you know. And you can really see that. I mean, if you look back at the race, there was nothing else going on whatsoever throughout that Grand Prix. Yes, we were quite preoccupied with the front 2 for like a third of the Grand Prix, which felt very weird actually, not gonna lie.
Lando Norris out front though.
Oscar's firmly within that DRS zone.
Piastri's
closer this lap.
Piastri!
Honestly, I started having thoughts that maybe there's too much of the front row. I need some variability on screen. But that's just absurd. I caught myself thinking this, and I thought, how fucking broken am I? I'm watching the front 2 battling, having at each other lap after lap, days on end, and I'm thinking like, where's my midfield battle? Why am I not showing the overtakes of poor old Alonso having at it, you know? Why am I not showing how the poor sap Tsunoda is playing with himself in the back of the pack?
First, that's going to be contact, and it is Tsunoda and Stroll coming together at turn 3.
But why? Why should I care? I'm literally being shown the championship playing out in front of me. I'm so used to being told 3 different other storylines along the track just to keep me preoccupied and away from realizing how uneventful and predictable the top 3 teams are nowadays. I just felt like something was off. I felt uneasy. That's ridiculous in my book. I swear, F1 is the only sport in which the producer's main job is to try and come up with stories during the event so as to keep me from concluding that the sport is fucking boring. This and the UFC. Because honestly, without an occasional DUI and Conor knocking some poor sap's teeth out at the bar, that sport can be a fucking snooze as well. But luckily, we do have 2 championship-worthy lads in the juiced-up cabs. Otherwise, I'd be back in my Mercedes depression era. And nobody wants that, trust me. But apart from those 2, it was really, really empty, eh? And Ferrari sure as fuck only made matters worse.
Yeah, as I pointed out on the practice start, Leclerc was right there with Lando.
For a team literally starting 2nd and 4th, right there with the championship contenders, we did not see much of them on our screens at all. Actually, we didn't see them at all, did we? But as an avid F1 fan, Ferrari was making my life a living hell, as per the fucking usual. First, Leclerc ended up losing a grid spot in this very uneventful ass GP, despite a solid drive from the boy wonder. He just literally had no chance, none whatsoever. Even if he ended up beside Lando in the opening few corners, judging by the end-all gap from the 2 McLarens on the final time sheet, you could have called it done and dusted on fucking lap 1, couldn't you? And from there on, there was just silence. Nothing on the 2 Ferraris, for a while at least. Of course, the only time that they were indeed brought up was for, yet again, more strategy woes.
And now Rapid.
Is my pace really bad? Because the tyres are fine.
And we box now.
My tyres are okay. Can I extend? How many more laps left?
And box is box, 20 laps.
I don't want to stop. 20 laps left.
Box.
So I think someone might need to tell Ferrari at some point.
They're all fucking fired. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, mate. Honestly, they seem to be tripping up over fucking nothing nowadays. Even in such an overtake less GP, no, not a lot of overtake, whatever, where seemingly there is no pressure to get the strategy right and, make the right calls, the red fucks end up screaming at each other on the radio, tripping up over each other, trying to pick what to do in 2 laps time. Honestly, the calls were so confusing, I even started to get confused on what strategy was being called looking back at it. That's me, now, overly analysing the Grand Prix with hindsight. Imagine driving a bullet train at 200 miles an hour, having an Italian prick whispering something in your ear about pit stops, seemingly asking for a response, but at the same time just kind of not really giving a single fuck what your answer is. You'll just end up repeating the same damn command.
There's a time where you just mind your own business, and I think that's one of those times.
And all that while knowing that your future in the sport could not be any closer tied to this brand, and you have another 2 to 4 years still to go to work with these fuckers. So you can't exactly tell the guy to just go fuck himself when he ignores your ask about not pitting for the 3rd time and tells you a box, the 7th time in a fucking row. Alright. You can tell I'm a little fucking annoyed by these fucks. I mean, if I'm siding with fucking Hamilton and protecting his ass on this, I must really mean it. It's honestly not even funny at this point. The comedic aspect of this topic had evaporated like 5 Grand Prix ago. Now it's just sad. I swear, you can hand those clowns in red a fucking water gun and they'll end up killing themselves with it. Lewis will just end up being drowned by the water stream ricocheting off of Vasseurs' glaring bald head. And Charlie will just jump into the nearest lake with a cinder block tied to himself. Because he really doesn't need much to be pushed over the edge these days anyway. And speaking of Leclerc, fucking hell, it really is a reality TV show with him as the main star at this point. I think he may be able to just retire himself by cutting up all the radio team chatter with his engineer in the past few Grand Prix and selling it to Discovery as the new Italian version of the American Chopper. And then of course we gotta feature his current and ex-girlfriend as the awfully similar looking hot brunettes fighting over the poor boy's heart. And we definitely have to have the lead engineer for Ferrari be played by a black guy. And then we can go for the Golden Globes as well. But unfortunately, it is Ferrari. So, that will definitely never happen now, will it? Now, this one is a real fucking contributor to the whole the sport being a boring shit show thing. The thing about F1 nowadays, right, is that we've entered yet another era year. Luckily, of course, we have the situation where the team has 2 kids capable of turning the steering wheel at the right time, and only one of them is a mistake-riddled protege, and we can rely on the other to pick up the pieces if necessary. But usually, the one-man show is at least somewhat relieved by the underdog storyline. You know, by one team that clearly does not have a championship winning car, pulling some performance out their ass, at least occasionally giving us a fun race to follow. Now, of course, that will never be enough to take the actual championship, and we all deep inside know that this is just a traveling circus that only sometimes visits us for just a quick show. But at least it's a fun one to watch, and gives at least a week or two to pretend it's not all over when actually fucking is. And of course, who better than the Dutch sloth himself to be mounting this challenge, as he's held that job for so many years in the past. One time, he actually managed to make it work, but that honestly was such a fucking brilliant season that I don't even want to get into it. I'll get my hopes up again, and I can't deal with yet another disappointment in the sport. But this time, obviously, courtesy of the pasta boy, Verstappen Jr. was relieved of his duties early on, and he could go home early. Might have even made it home in time to tuck his little kid and stepkid in for the night. Oh, who am I fucking kidding? He probably just ignored the wife and went straight for the simulator. Probably for the better, though. Because after that performance, I think he was going home to punch.
And then Max didn't even have the chance to start sweating.
But the curious thing here is that usually you would think, oh, one man down, that's alright. There's another teammate in the same car. Well, here's the curious thing about Red Bull nowadays. They're a one-horse type of team. Like, literally. This isn't even a joke anymore. Before, when I took a piss out of his teammates for underperforming, clearly unable to match his outrageous achievements, it was sad, but it was manageable. I think what this race did prove is that there's just isn't a second driver anymore. You take out Verstappen from the team, and that's exactly what the Austrian GP did. Probably the only actual thing that GP was good for, if I'm honest. And there's no Red Bull on track. Not anymore. There's Haas mingling about. There's the two gambling duo, whatever the fuck their name is for this Grand Prix. There's Alpine just floating around. Stroll, of course, banging his head against the fucking wall. And then there's Yuki.
Sonoda trying to repay the favour on fresher tyres, and they make contact and they spin!
Thank fuck the two Williams DNF this race. Otherwise he'd be behind those two, and that would be humiliation no F1 driver could bear. Considering they were a man down, Russell was left all on his lonesome to carry the German, British, Austrian team, whatever. But he just couldn't do anything, mate. Fuck.
And that was just as Antonelli was wiping out Verstappen.
Just close the door on the braking.
Yeah, telling tales to teacher.
For a guy who just won a Grand Prix, he is nowhere to be seen on track. Even worse than the fucking Ferraris, mate. And that is really saying something in Austria. I honestly even forgot that Charlie existed until he dapped up the Italian interviewer after the weigh-ins.
Charles, almost.
If I'm not mistaken, George finished quite comfortably ahead of the two McLarens last week. Or 2 weeks ago now. I don't fucking remember anymore. And of course I can't check, because the new F1 website is so poorly constructed I can barely find my way around to the race weekend schedule. Well, luckily the gambling section is nice and easy to access now. Clearly they've got their fucking priorities in order. And that's not even a dig from my side, to be honest. I think at least someone understands what their main revenue stream is. But Georgie was a clear favourite last race. In Austria, the fucker was almost lapped on pure pace by the two front runners.
George Russell is almost a lap down today. If the camera shot was wide enough, you'd see Lando Norris coming in the background behind these two.
If it wasn't for Georgie moving away to the pits, this was going to be the most painful realization you could have fucking had.
Let's give you a live speed as we climb the hill. George Russell's being brought in.
Honestly, when they called him in, I immediately assumed it was not for any strategic purpose and purely just to save him from the fucking humiliation. It was horrible. To me, it is just absolutely mad that a top team can fluctuate in their performance so damn much race to race, but I guess such is life nowadays. F1 cars are so damn dialed in that you can change the elevation a bit, up the degrees, and increase the speed, and all of a sudden, a works Mercedes could be mistaken for a fucking blue-flagged Williams. Honest to God, this was such a fucking boring GP. I have nothing to say about Georgie. It was just empty. I can tell you a lot about the two fucking orange peels, of course. Those got plenty of airtime, and I have now. I'm sorry about that. And I can always say something about the Ferraris, since they just end up on air one way or another. Usually followed by 10 minutes of discussions from the commentators of how Ferrari can be so shit during a Grand Prix.
He couldn't have been any clearer that he wanted to stay out.
And why pit?
There's an idea.
But the way they pitted Leclerc in Canada, and this is exactly the same thing as befell Leclerc in Canada.
Maybe you're just being too optimistic.
So yeah, moving on I guess. Oh, and obviously they only had one car on the grid, so you can cut down my Merc chat in half from the usual. Then again, y'all have clearly no interest in my take on the kid, in that sense that it's actually good he crashed himself out of lap 1. Saved me some f***ing time. Cheers, mate. So there you go. There really was nothing much to give by the big teams in Austria. The McLarens are the only thing that kept a sliver of our attention throughout the GP, but when those two separated, which is bound to happen, there was nothing else. Literally fucking nothing. Ferrari was just fucking themselves, but that's expected. Red Bull lost their only driver, and Mercedes, being one man down, had nothing even resembling a top 3 car. It was a boring fucking escapade, I have to say. Let me get something straight, okay? The McLaren duel is not enough to hold up the whole season. We're essentially losing the typical underdog player we're all so used to, with Maxi slipping away from the championship. And secondly, the sport relies, and has relied in the past, on splicing up different storylines to distract the audience from the lack of substantial racing. I mean, it creates a narrative where there isn't any. And the Austrian GP revealed that very well, because for once, we had this contrast of just pure one-on-one racing at the front, as it should be, even just for a little bit. And thirdly, the grid is honestly one broken mess at this point. Red Bull is a one-man team. I mean, remove Max and it's Toro Rosso with more tech logos. Ferrari is a tragic comedy with no punchlines at this point. And Mercedes are Diet Williams on some weekends. It's f***ing absurd at this point. And yes, I am crying wolf a little bit, and I am a bit exaggerating. But that's what I do. I over-exaggerate certain aspects of the sport because I love it. And I want you to also see what I mean. Because facts are facts, even if they are a little bit more over-dramatized. And yeah, Austria was a bit of a bad case of the runs when it comes to this stuff. Now, of course, some may say, well, Dion, this was just a one-time thing. There were certain circumstances that neutralized the race, and it was just unfortunate. Firstly, Maxi, the typical source of any and all drama, was neutralized early on. And he wasn't even able to get in a brawl outside the car, as the poor sap that hit him wasn't Russell, but a barely legal teenager instead. And with the penalty points hanging over him, there really wasn't much he could have done. But also kudos to the kid. He smartly didn't get out the car until he was physically escorted by the marshals, just to delay the impending talk with Maxi, until the very last moment, giving the Dutchman to blow off some steam on his own. Smart.
And it looked to me initially like Antonelli was just all locked up and out of control there.
Yeah, and you can see Antonelli still sitting in the car. I think he was rather staying in the car thinking, this is the safest place until I ascertain whether Max is angry or not.
This kid will go far, let me tell you. And then, of course, this was especially exacerbated due to the high-speed nature of the Austrian circuit. So McLaren was especially fast, while Mercedes was especially slow. And Ferrari, well, they just arrived, I guess. But my friend, what's next now? Silverstone? What type of circuit is that exactly? High speed, flowing, and brutal if your car's not planted. Really not the place for your Ferrari strategy in turn to get creative. Yeah. Well, fuck.